Right, spending on the royal family reached a whopping £102.4 million last year, reports has revealed today. That is up 17% from last year, and it's the first time that the spending has passed £100 million in a year. Got to be fair to this, though, by the way, because a lot of the media are furious about this today, saying, of course, we're at a cost of living crisis, or why are we spending all this money, etc. But one of the reasons it was so high is because it does include costs for the renovation of Buckingham Palace. But to give you some context here, taxpayers contribute just over £86 million towards the royal family every single year. But I just want to put that in a bit more context as well. That's £1, I think it's £1.29 per person per year. Are they worth it, Charlotte?
Definitely. I mean, £1.26 per person?
No, £1.29.
£1.29, sorry.
Yes.
I mean, it's a really interesting discussion to have, isn't it? Because people are focusing on the cost, but not actually thinking about how much money the royal family bring in for the Exchequer. So, yes, 100 million is a very large amount of money, 86 million from taxpayers. But actually, there are all sorts of assessments of the additional value from tourism, from the tax that comes from the sales of all the different royal merchandise you can get if you go to a gallery or a palace, or, you know, when people go and visit these sites. There was one assessment that was done looking at the 5 years running up to 2019, so just before the pandemic, that said that actually the overall value of the royal family in those 5 years was about £2.8 billion to the Exchequer. So, yes, no one is going to sit here, I'm sure, and say 100 million isn't a lot of money. But if you're bringing in multiples of that for taxpayers each year, then I think actually that does represent quite good value for money. And I think the other thing is, you know, there's obviously been some bumpy trips recently and some controversy and, you know, rightly some questions being asked around how the royal family positions some of the history. But actually, ultimately, they're a huge asset in terms of the soft power Britain has. And, you know, that person who'd emailed in saying, just glimpsing the Queen, I mean, you know, that's an incredibly powerful experience. And I think we saw that over the Jubilee, that the royal family were really bringing the nation together on this really positive experience. So I think they're great. I think they're definitely worth the money.
Tessa, do you agree?
No, I don't agree, because although I would say, yes, it's an amazing feat for the Queen to have lived so long and do her job and role as head of state and bring the nation together about certain values to do with resilience, with nationhood. That's all very well, but really what we're talking about here is the idea that there's so much money spent, but where's the accountability? And I think that it doesn't really matter whether the head of state is elected or not, because there'll always be money to be spent on renovating palaces, on the nation's art gallery and art collection, on simply running a diplomatic service, really, to host heads of state in that wonderful banquet room in Buckingham Palace. So that there'll always be money spent. So I think that it's not really just a question of accountability to do with how the money's spent as such, because, you know, the accounts are made, they're made public, they're presented to Parliament, they're scrutinised by the National Audit Office. If we want full accountability for how our state is run, we need to have elected representatives. And that's really the argument and the debate that we should be having more of, rather than just ignore it and say, oh, yes, they wear nice frocks, it's good for Britain.
But I'm intrigued that you associate being elected with, therefore, true accountability, because we have a number of elected MPs, and I would say that one thing that they absolutely lack is proper accountability for the things that they do, the mistakes they make, the decisions, etc. So I don't necessarily correlate entirely elected with accountability.
Well, the thing is, at least we can vote MPs out, but we can't vote the Queen out, we can't vote Prince Andrew out. So
what would you
they still, they're born into it, you know. So my point is that we need to debate more what we want from our society. Do we want every single leader to be elected? Is it worth it? What do we get out of it? We can vote them out. We can put pressure on them. And if our MPs or anyone else, new head of state, is not up to the task, that we don't agree with their policies, we can say so. We can put pressure on them. And we can maybe vote them out.
The royal family has nothing to do, though, with policy.